Welcome back to the deep dive. We're doing something a little different today.
Yeah, we are.
Usually we take a look at a broad topic or maybe a current trend, but today we are setting the dials on the time machine for a very specific coordinate. I want you to picture the year 1985.
It's a fantastic year to revisit. I mean, in the world of technology, this is the digital Wild West. The maps hadn't been drawn yet.
Right.
The sheriffs, like Microsoft and Apple, they were still just establishing their territories. And the average user was trying to figure out if this whole computer thing was actually going to stick around.
Exactly. The hair was big, the shoulder pads were massive, and the computer screens were monochromatic. Yeah. Mostly just green and black glowing in the corner of the office.
Yeah, the classic CRT monitors.
And in that exact setting, we are looking at a specific event. We're calling it the word processor war of 1985.
It sounds dramatic, but it really was. This wasn't just a regular product launch. It was a battle for the soul of how we actually interact with text on a screen.
Our main subject is the release of a software package called WordStar 2000. And to guide us through this, we have a really fascinating primary source. It's a contemporary review from the February 1985 issue of Personal Computer World, written by Kathy Lang.
A great source.
Yeah, and we're also going to layer in some retrospective economic data to really understand the financial weight of this software, because the pricing context is wild.
It is, and Kathy Lang's review is such a gem because she's writing from the trenches. She's not looking back with nostalgia or anything. She's looking at this box of floppy disks with the skepticism of a professional who just needs to get work done.
Right, she's not grading on a curve. So here is our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just reviewing a 40-year-old piece of software. We are going to explore how a tech giant MicroPro tried to completely reinvent the wheel and nearly capsize their own boat in the process.
It's a case study in corporate overreach, really.
And we're going to look at the incredible friction of changing human habits. Specifically, we're going to talk about muscle memory.
That's the core of the whole story, muscle memory.
And finally, we're going to trace the birth of features that you and I just completely take for granted today. Things like undo and bold. It's hard to imagine a world without them, but as we'll see, someone actually had to invent them, and that transition wasn't smooth at all.
No, it really wasn't. It's a story about the tension between logical design and human reality.
So let's jump right into the hook. To understand why WordStar 2000 was such a big deal, we really have to talk about the incumbent champion, the original WordStar.
Right. You cannot overstate the absolute dominance of the original WordStar in the early 1980s. It was the industry standard.
It was everywhere.
Literally everywhere. If you walked into a newsroom or a law firm or a publishing house in 1983, you heard the specific clatter of keyboards running WordStar. It had virtually no serious competition that could even touch its feature set at the time.
And this is a massive, but it wasn't exactly user-friendly, was it?
Oh, not even close. It was actively hostile to new users.
There is this quote from our source, Kathy Lang, that I think frames this entire discussion perfectly. She writes, most users swear by it, but a substantial proportion swear at it.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up the power user paradox of the era.
Power user paradox.
Yeah, because WordStar was incredibly complex. It was running on the CP/M operating system initially, which was a text-based command line environment.
Right.
There were no icons. There was no mouse to click on a save button or anything like that.
So how did you even use it? I mean, if there are no buttons to click.
You memorized control codes, hundreds of them. To do literally anything, you had to hold down the control key and press a letter or a sequence of letters, and these weren't always intuitive.
Give us a taste of this complexity. Paint the picture for us.
Well, take navigation, for example. Today, we just have arrow keys. But in the early 80s, many keyboards didn't have dedicated arrow keys. Or if they did, the software actually ignored them to stay compatible with older machines.
That sounds infuriating.
It was. So to move the cursor up, down, left, or right, you used a diamond pattern of keys on the left side of the keyboard. Control-E for up, Control-X for down, Control-S for left, and Control-D for right.
Control-E-X-S-D. It sounds like you're inputting a cheat code in a video game just to move your cursor to the next line.
It totally does. But here's the thing. Once you actually learned it, you were fast. Incredibly fast.
Because your hands never moved.
Exactly. Your hands never left the home row. You didn't have to reach for a mouse or reach way over for arrow keys. You became a wizard. Mastering WordStar was essentially a badge of honor in the workplace. It separated the pros from the amateurs.
So you have this massive, highly loyal user base that has spent years wiring their brains to these specific esoteric hand movements. They are the users who, quote, swear by it.
Right. They've survived the learning curve, and they are proud of it.
But MicroPro, the company behind WordStar, they look at the market and they see a problem. They see all the people swearing at it. They see the rise of the IBM PC and all these new competitors appearing on the horizon. And they decide they need to make word processing accessible to the masses.
Which is a completely logical business decision. You want to expand your market. You want the managers, the secretaries, the home users. You don't just want the technical wizards anymore.
So they release WordStar 2000, and the name alone 2000. It just screams the future, doesn't it?
It is the ultimate 1980s branding trope. Adding 2000 to a product name was just shorthand for, this is the space age version. It implies a clean break from the past.
But as we dig into the source material, we find that the launch was actually incredibly confusing. Kathy Lang notes that despite the futuristic name, MicroPro wasn't actually positioning this as a direct replacement for the original WordStar.
Yeah, this is where the strategy gets really messy. They were attempting to bifurcate the product line.
Bifurcate. That's a $5 word.
It just means splitting it in two. Their plan was essentially, okay, we will keep selling the original complicated WordStar to the die-hard veterans who love their control codes. And we will sell WordStar 2000 as a separate parallel product for the new, less technical users who want power, but also want friendliness.
That seems risky. You're essentially competing with yourself at that point.
Yeah.
And you're telling your most loyal customers that the new cool product isn't really for them.
It is hugely risky, and they compounded that risk with a major platform error right at launch. The review highlights that WordStar 2000 was available only on the IBM PC.
Oh, wow. So if you were running a different system, and there were a lot of competing systems back then,
so mad.
you were just out of luck.
You were totally abandoned. The original WordStar ran on everything. CP/M, NPM, MSF, DOS. It was ubiquitous. By launching WordStar 2000 exclusively for the IBM PC environment, they were betting the farm that IBM would win the hardware war.
Which I guess turned out to be true eventually.
Historically, yes, it turned out to be a good bet. But in 1985, it alienated a huge chunk of their existing customer base immediately.
So the landscape is set. You have the champion, the old difficult beloved WordStar, and you have the challenger WordStar 2000, the, quote, friendly usurper. But the real war wasn't fought in the marketing department at all. It was fought directly on the keyboard.
This is the part that fascinates me the most. The battle of muscle memory.
Let's talk about the Ctrl+K catastrophe. This is the user experience nightmare that Kathy Lang focuses on really heavily in her review.
To understand this, you really have to go back to those control codes we talked about. In the original WordStar, one of the most important functions you could do was manipulating blocks of text.
Right.
Copying a paragraph, moving a sentence, deleting a whole section. The command sequence for this always started with Ctrl+K.
Ctrl+K. Why K?
Nobody really knows for sure. It was pretty arbitrary. Maybe it was just a convenient key on the keyboard for the original programmer. But for millions of users, Ctrl+K simply meant block. It was completely hardwired into their nervous systems.
So it became instinct.
Exactly. You didn't consciously think, I want to move this block. You just thought Ctrl+K and your fingers did it.
It's like riding a bike or driving a car. You don't think about the mechanics of balance or pedals, you just do it.
That's right. Now enter WordStar 2000. MicroPro decides to be logical. They look at it and say, well, K doesn't make any sense for block. We are going to change the block command to Ctrl+B.
B for block.
B for block. Semantically, it is perfect. It's a mnemonic. It's so much easier to teach a new user. You just say, press B for block.
But for the old user, the ones who built their entire workflow around WordStar?
It's a total disaster. It is a massive violation of the unwritten contract between the tool and the user. Kathy Lang writes, with this wonderful British understatement, that long-standing users will have some unlearning to do.
Unlearning. That is such a heavy concept when you really think about it.
It really is, because it is infinitely harder to unlearn a deeply ingrained habit than to just learn a new one from scratch. When you are under pressure, when you are typing fast on a deadline, your brain naturally reverts to the oldest, most worn pathway.
Right.
So these veteran users would hit Ctrl+K expecting to move a block and nothing would happen. Or worse, the wrong thing would happen.
It creates so much friction. It makes the user feel stupid, even though they're doing what they've always done.
And it makes them actively hate the software. It's like if a car manufacturer decided one year to swap the brake and the gas pedals just because alphabetically B comes before G, so the brake should naturally be on the right.
Right.
Logically, maybe you could make an argument for it in a boardroom. But practically out on the road, you were going to cause crashes.
There is a really delicious irony here that you pointed out in our pre-show notes regarding Ctrl+B.
Yes, history definitely has a sense of humor. In 1985, WordStar 2000 tried to claim Ctrl+B for block. But today, in 2026, if you hit Ctrl+B in Word or Google Docs or almost any other text editor anywhere, what actually happens?
The text becomes bold.
Exactly. We eventually settled on Ctrl+B for bold as a universal standard. So MicroPro was trying to revolutionize the keyboard shortcuts just right before the rest of the industry decided to go in a completely different direction.
It captures just how fluid the UI standards were at the time. Everyone was just kind of making it up as they went along.
Yeah, there was no playbook yet.
Speaking of bold, that brings us to the visual aspect of the software, which is a huge shift. The review makes a really big deal about the screen display itself.
This was the major selling point for the 2000 version. We really have to remember that in the era of the original WordStar, what you see is what you get, YCAC-IWIG, was basically a fantasy.
Describe what the old visual experience was actually like.
If you wanted a word to be bold in the original WordStar, you couldn't actually see it as bold on the screen. The monitor technology or the software just couldn't display different font weights.
Right.
So instead, you inserted control codes directly into the text. It looked like this $B. This text is bold $B.
So you were essentially reading raw code mixed right in with your actual sentences.
Yes, exactly. You had to have this parser running in your own brain, constantly translating the symbols into what the final printout would hypothetically look like. You'd read it and think, okay, ignore that $B. That just means the printer will start bolding here.
That sounds completely exhausting.
It was a very high cognitive load. It slowed down the reading process. WordStar 2000 changed that. Kathy Lang notes that with this new version, the text is actually emboldened or underlined directly on the monitor.
Finally, the screen is actually telling the truth.
It was a massive leap forward. It meant you could finally focus on the content and the layout without having to mentally simulate the physical printer in your head. It brought the user one huge step closer to the final product.
So despite all those muscle memory issues with the keyboard shortcuts, there was genuine innovation happening here. I want to walk through the feature set because some of these things are foundational to how we work today. Let's start with the undo button.
The lifesaver.
That is literally what she calls it in the review. A potential lifesaver.
We take undo so completely for granted today that we forget it actually had to be invented. In early word processors, deletion was final. It was totally destructive. If you highlighted a paragraph and hit delete, it was gone, just into the void.
No trash can, no recycle bin to dig it out of.
Nothing. If you hadn't manually saved the file recently, that work was just lost forever.
That creates a very specific kind of anxiety while you work. I can't even imagine.
It does. It forces you to be incredibly conservative with your editing. You hesitate before you delete anything. You save constant backup versions on different disks. The introduction of the UNDO command in WordStar 2000 introduced the concept of forgiveness to computing.
I really love that phrasing, forgiveness.
It is a profound psychological shift. When you know you can undo, you are finally free to experiment. You can try rewriting a sentence. You can try moving a paragraph to the very end of the document to see how it flows.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, you just hit undo.
It turns the computer from a strict, rigid recording device into an actual creative partner.
Precisely.
Then there is the windowing feature. This also sounded incredibly advanced for a DOS machine in 1985.
It was way ahead of its time. This is years before Microsoft Windows 3.0 becomes the global standard. The review details the ability to open, quote, windows into 3 different documents simultaneously.
So I can have my screen actually split up.
Yes. Imagine you are writing a business report. In the top half of the screen, you have your main draft open. In the bottom half, you can open a second completely different file, maybe your research notes or a spreadsheet of data.
And I can see them both at the exact same time.
You can see them both on the screen. Now, you can only edit one at a time. You have to toggle, which is the active window to actually type. But just the visibility was a total game changer.
Compared to the old way, which was what exactly?
The old way was what we call the paper shuffle. Yeah, you save your main file, you close it completely, you open the notes file, you find the number you need, and write it down on a physical piece of paper on your desk. You close the notes file, you reopen the draft file, you find your place again, and then you type the number in.
That sounds barbaric.
It was the best we had. Windowing finally acknowledged that writing isn't just a simple linear process, it is a synthesis of different sources. It allowed the computer to start matching the actual complexity of the human thought process.
Now, for every step forward, it seems, WordStar 2000 took a really weird half-step backwards. We have to talk about Typewriter Mode.
Ah, yes. The feature that proves nostalgia is a very powerful drug.
This part of the review just cracked me up. Can you explain to the listener what Typewriter Mode actually did?
It did exactly what it says on the tin. You toggle this mode on, and when you press a key on your computer keyboard, say the letter A, the printer sitting next to you immediately fires and stamps an A onto the physical paper.
So it literally turns your cutting-edge, expensive personal computer into a basic typewriter.
A very expensive, very loud typewriter, yes.
Kathy Lang is absolutely scathing about this feature. She writes, "I can't imagine any self-respecting typist needing that much reassurance."
It is a brutal burn. But she actually digs a little deeper and speculates on why this feature even exists in the first place. She suggests it was basically a sales gimmick, possibly designed for managers who thought their secretaries were, quote, timid.
Timid secretaries. It sounds so patronizing to us now.
It really does, and it certainly reflects the gender dynamics of the 80s office environment, but it also reflects a very genuine technophobia of the era. You have to understand, people back then did not trust computers.
Right.
They especially didn't trust magnetic floppy disks. They'd think, where is my work? Is it really on that invisible disk? I can't see it, so how do I know it's safe?
They needed the ink on the page to prove it was real.
They needed that immediate physical validation. Typewriter Mode was essentially a security blanket. It was a bridge for people who were completely terrified of the abstraction of digital storage. It's silly to us now, but in 1985, it was probably a necessary box-ticking feature for some nervous procurement manager buying the software for their office.
It's the digital equivalent putting training wheels on a Ferrari.
Exactly, just to get them in the seat. But alongside that silliness, there was one other feature that was actually a massive productivity booster. Background printing.
Yes.
Yeah.
She calls this a major goodie.
Right. Because in 1985, printing was a massive bottleneck for any office.
Why was it such a problem?
Single-core processors. Very slow clock speeds. When you told a computer to print a document, it had to dedicate almost all of its computing resources just to feeding that data down the cable to the printer.
And the printers themselves were pretty slow, right?
Oh, incredibly slow. There were mechanical daisy wheels, literally physical wheels spinning around and a little hammer striking the letters against a ribbon. A 20-page document could easily take 15 or 20 minutes to print out.
And during that entire 20 minutes, what could you do on the computer?
Absolutely nothing. Your computer was a very expensive brick. The screen basically said, printing, please wait. You couldn't type, you couldn't edit another file, you just sat there.
The famous forced coffee break feature?
Exactly. People would just leave their desks. WordStar 2000 figured out how to use system interrupts, basically slicing up the processor time microscopically to allow you to print a file in the background while you continued to actively edit another completely different document in the foreground.
That is pure ROI right there. Return on investment.
It's massive. If you have a secretary or a technical writer who is being paid by the hour and they are suddenly regaining 20 minutes of active productivity every single time they print a long document, the software essentially pays for itself in a few months.
So on paper, this sounds like a mix of some really great futuristic features and a few weird quirks. But then the review takes a sharp turn. Kathy Lang goes into this deeply technical dive regarding the ruler line on the screen, and she uncovers a flaw that sounds absolutely maddening to deal with.
This is what we call the 12-pitch nightmare, and it is a perfect example of software trying to be smart and ending up being incredibly stupid.
We need to break this down for the listener because it's a bit technical. What exactly is pitch in this context?
Pitch simply refers to the density of the printed characters.
Yeah.
Basically, how many letters fit into exactly 1 inch of horizontal space on the paper. The standard Pika type was 10 pitch, meaning 10 characters per inch.
Okay.
But in the UK and in a lot of legal or formal business settings everywhere, elite type, which is 12 pitch, was highly preferred. It was physically smaller, tighter, and you could fit more words on a single page.
Okay, so I am a user and I want to print my document in 12 pitch. What's the problem?
The problem was WordStar 2000's on-screen ruler. The visual ruler displayed at the very top of the editing screen was hard-coded by the programmers to measure strictly in tenths of an inch. It universally assumed you were using 10 pitch.
It just refused to adapt to anything else.
Right, so if you tell the software I am using a 12-pitch daisy wheel on my printer, the software says, okay, great, when I actually print this, I will make sure to squeeze 12 characters into every inch of paper. But the screen display couldn't squeeze the visual pixels. The screen display was totally fixed.
So the visual alignment just breaks down completely.
Completely shatters. Imagine you are typing a line of text. On the physical paper, it will be exactly 6 inches long. But on the screen, because the characters are displayed wider than they will actually print, the text visually spills over. It extends way past the right edge of the ruler line.
So the ruler at the top shows 60 characters for that line, but the line of text beneath it actually holds 72 characters.
Yes. The ruler is just flat out lying to you. It creates this intense visual dissonance. You look at the monitor and you think, my margins are completely wrong. This is going to print right off the edge of the page. But the software is basically saying, trust me, it'll be fine.
That sounds like a nightmare if you are trying to create a table or align specific columns of numbers.
It makes it literally impossible. You can't visually align columns using the spacebar or tabs if the screen isn't representing the true physical width correctly. Kathy Lang is very, very critical of this specific flaw.
Understandably.
She says she would gladly trade a more conventional approach, meaning she'd rather just manually set the margins herself and do the complicated math in her head just to avoid this visual confusion.
It really illustrates the harsh growing pains of the YSWG era. They were desperately trying to bridge this massive gap between the digital pixel on a screen and the mechanical wheel of a printer, and they just fell right into the chasm.
It's the uncanny valley of early interface design. It was just close enough to reality to be useful, but wrong enough to be completely infuriating.
Yeah, we really have to talk about the cost of all this.
Yeah.
We've looked at the inflation data provided in our source material, and frankly, my jaw hit the floor when we ran the numbers.
It is genuinely shocking by modern software standards.
In the review, the full system price for a new copy of WordStar 2000 is listed as £440.
Which, on its own, already sounds like a pretty significant amount of money for 1985. But when you run that through the inflation calculator...
Yeah, we did the math. The cumulative UK inflation from 1985 to 2026 is roughly 293%. That means £440 in 1985 is approximately £1,730 in 2026 money.
£1,700.
For a word processor. Not a whole computer system, just the software box.
You really have to stop and think about that. Today, you can just open a browser and use Google Docs for completely free. Or you can buy a Microsoft Office subscription for a small monthly fee.
Right.
Back then, software was a major capital investment. It wasn't an impulse buy. You didn't just download an app from a store. You actually went to a board meeting to get budget approval to buy a software package. It was treated exactly like buying an industrial lathe or a new forklift for the warehouse.
And even if you were already a loyal customer, someone who had already paid for and owned the original WordStar, the upgrade price was incredibly steep. It cost £200 just to upgrade.
That's nearly £800 in today's money, just for an update.
Imagine Apple charging you £800 to update iOS on your phone overnight.
And imagine that the £800 update completely changes all the swipe gestures so you don't even know how to open your apps anymore.
That really puts the, quote, war in perspective, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a business owner and I just paid £800 per employee to upgrade their computers and then their daily productivity drops off a cliff because everyone is confused by Ctrl+B,
yeah,
I'm going to be absolutely furious.
Exactly. The extremely high price tag meant the software had to be perfect out of the box. It had to deliver immediate, tangible value. And because of that muscle memory friction, it fundamentally failed that test for a lot of existing users.
So with all of that said, the lying on-screen ruler, the silly typewriter mode, the exorbitant price tag, what was Kathy Lang's final verdict in the review? Did she tell people to just avoid it entirely?
Surprisingly, no, she didn't. She concludes that it is definitely pricey, but potentially well worth the cost.
Really? That seems a bit contradictory after all the criticism.
You have to look at the extra facilities that came in the box. This is really the very beginning of the modern Office suite concept. WordStar 2000 wasn't just a basic text editor anymore. The package included a built-in spelling corrector, a mail merge system, and even built-in calculator functions.
Ah, I see. In 1985, those were usually entirely separate purchases, right?
Completely separate. A standalone spell checker software might cost you another £100. A standalone mail merge tool might be another £150 on top of that.
Wow.
And they were incredibly clunky to use together. You literally had to save your document, close your word processor, swap the floppy disks, load up the spell checker, run it, close it, swap the disks back, and reopen your word processor.
Just to check spelling.
Yes. WordStar 2000 bundled all of those disparate tools into one single integrated environment.
So the value proposition was actually there if you looked at the big picture.
It was the Swiss Army knife argument. Yes, the knife itself is very expensive up front, but it effectively replaces the screwdriver, the scissors, and the bottle opener you were going to have to buy anyway. For a new business starting from scratch, it was actually a pretty good deal. But Lang clearly notes the disconnect in the product's identity. The new features, like the helpful on-screen menus and the simplified commands, were clearly designed to help beginners. But the price tag meant it was only truly affordable for large corporations.
It was a product with a massive identity crisis.
Precisely. It didn't know if it was meant for the high-powered CEO or the casual home user, so it desperately tried to be both and ended up satisfying neither of them fully.
Let's zoom out a bit to the historical legacy of this word processor war. WordStar 2000 didn't exactly win in the end, did it?
It lost badly, and tragically it ended up taking the original WordStar down with it.
How so? Just from the confusion.
By splitting their own market in half, by confusing the branding with the parallel versions, and by alienating their most hardcore power users, MicroPro essentially created a massive vacuum in the industry. They signaled to the market that the old standard was officially changing, and right into that vacuum stepped the competition. Specifically, WordPerfect.
WordPerfect.
Yeah.
Man, that name brings back some memories.
WordPerfect looked at the huge mistake MicroPro just made and capitalized on it. They didn't force their users to unlearn everything overnight. They simply offered cleaner software, much better customer support, and crucially, they made sure their software ran on absolutely every machine imaginable, not just the IBM PC.
Right.
So while WordStar was basically fighting a civil war between its own two versions, WordPerfect just quietly marched in and conquered the world.
And then eventually Microsoft Word comes along and eats everyone anyway.
Right. Microsoft Word takes the YSI-YG concepts that WordStar 2000 struggled so hard with, the bold text, the undo function, the windows, and they finally perfected it within the graphical user interface of Windows. WordStar 2000 was essentially a bridge to the future, but it collapsed while people were halfway across it.
I think the biggest takeaway from this entire deep dive isn't really about the code or the old hardware. It's about what we call the unlearning curve.
Absolutely. We always tend to judge new technology based strictly on specs. We asked, is it faster? Does it have more features?
Yeah.
But the real barrier to adoption is almost always human. It's the neural pathways in our brains.
You have to respect the muscle memory.
If you make a user feel stupid because their hands are doing the wrong thing purely out of habit, they will instantly resent the product. The friction of unlearning is by far the most expensive cost in any software upgrade.
That is such a powerful lesson, and it's so relevant even for today. We see modern tech companies trying to reinvent their interfaces all the time, and the user backlash is almost always about that exact same friction.
Why did you move the search button? Why is the swipe gesture suddenly different? It's the exact same war we saw in 1985. They're just fighting it with different weapons now.
So as we wrap up this little trip back to 1985, I would leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. We've been sitting here laughing about timid secretaries in typewriter mode, but let's be really honest with ourselves for a second.
This is the uncomfortable part.
We all have a bit of 1985 in us. I want to ask you, what inefficient workflow do you cling to right now simply because your own muscle memory refuses to learn the better way?
That's a really great question to ponder.
Are you still manually typing out your citations because you flat out refuse to learn how to use a modern reference manager? Are you emailing files to yourself with file names like final version v3 real.doc because you just don't trust the cloud sync to actually work?
Are you the timid secretary who needs to physically see the file sitting on your desktop background to truly believe it exists? Or are you the stubborn power user refusing to learn the new keyboard shortcuts because, quote, the old way was just better?
It's definitely worth thinking about. Sometimes the war isn't actually between competing software companies. It's between our own desire for shiny new features and our stubborn refusal to change our daily habits.
We are all creatures of habit at the end of the day, and sometimes hitting Ctrl+K just feels right in your bones.
On that note, we'll let you get back to your own shortcuts. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the word processor war of 1985.
It's been a real pleasure.
We'll catch you in the next timeline. Goodbye.